I am not transgender. I have never actually had a friend who is transgender. I mean, I have interacted and activities, been a part of groups um, in which someone was transgender, had, sort of friends who maybe had other pronouns, but my understanding of the transgender experience is very, very limited. I'm quite comfortable with my uh, penis, I guess, and the category that puts me in. Um, I mean, you know, well, there are things that I like about it, um, uh, uh, but I mean, I don't follow all the rules of my category. But I don't look at my dingalinger and go, "What the fuck is that doing there?" No, I'm a man. That statement feels okay to me. Now, some people it feels really, really terrible to, and there are some people that the statement, I am this gender, feels like a total invalidation, a total denial of their experience and self. I don't know anything. That's guessing. I shouldn't even talk about it that way, like I'm explaining something to whoever's watching this. You probably have as much or more understanding of transgenderism than I do, or as much maybe. I mean, you know, um, unless you have more. But I think that my understanding is around the average of someone who sort of cares to understand. And when I say sort of, it's because of the wording I was using, not that I only sort of care. But of course, I could do more. So anyway, now we're getting all caught up in that. Okay. What I do give a lot of thought to and have received information about is the mind in general. And if you follow this channel, you know that me think self no exist, that it's an illusion, a sense of unity between some of the activity in the mind. And then the more sense of unity there is, or maybe the more connection there is between certain activity in the mind, the more it's interpreted by different modalities, the more integrated a person feels. And we have the most of any species, the most of this sort of sense of integration and actual integration. But we are long from integrated, being completely integrated, and we are far from having all of the mental processes be a part of this unified consciousness. So, so if I define just for this video consciousness as the amount of um, cross modality interpretation that there is in the brain, or maybe there's some. Okay. Anyway, if I define it as so, my dog has a level of consciousness, in that he has an occipital lobe, so there's probably activity in that occipital lobe even when his eyes are closed, which means there are images existing, and then those images could be connected to certain um, memories, for instance. And so that image could then trigger maybe a memory, which can trigger itself a feeling felt here. And so there's a certain amount of integration there. And those three things may be happening in such a space or time that they are part of this unified experience, where and other images are not making it into that. Whereas and then you move up to primates and so on, the more neurons, the more connections there are, the more that you're going to have this, the more that the brain will experience unity about certain experiences. And so then what happens is the brain feels like there is this part of us. Those are the things being sort of experienced. And then the other activity in the brain is this other thing. Sometimes we call it our brain, right? So sometimes some of the activity in our brain is us. And then the part that isn't part of that picture is the brain or is the heart or whatever. Okay. But so in reality, it's most interpretive mechanisms are here. I thought neurons were only the cells here and that nerve cells were in the periphery, but that's wrong, apparently, which was a huge shock to me. So neurons everywhere. Most neurons that could be attributed to interpretation are going to be here. You can change neurons here without changing much about interpretive mechanisms, except for the information being fed into those. Anyway. I'm really trying to work on just keeping it simple and not getting caught up in meaningless words. Hopefully some of them were meaningful and some of what I just said has meaning, but let's try to get back into the basics. Okay. There is not a person up here. There's not a single spirit up here. Okay? No one spirit up here. When I say I, some neurons are shooting out the word I. Sometimes it's different ones. I mean, ultimately through the speech production. So I don't exist. There are parts of me. Okay. The other piece is that society, Western, well, no, actually, I shouldn't say that because Eastern society is actually even worse. So that was a stupid thing to say. That was wrong. That was a miss. Society tends to have very strict uh, gender roles. Okay. In the Arab world, extremely strict. East Asia, quite strict. The U.S., especially in the conservative movement, really quite strict. And so what we've got is we've got two categories, man and woman. Those are the most obvious categories. So we've got these two categories, and then we have a whole bunch of properties and attributes. We have a whole bunch of properties. Oh, gosh, it's so hard to keep it to make it try to stay as real and simple as possible and not let yourself get carried away with words. Okay. Two group. One called male, one called female. Male, properties. Female, properties. Okay. Person, lots of different mechanisms. Looking at two options, male, female. Mechanisms like male things, mechanisms like female things. And then the question is how compelled you are by this. Okay, so someone who is fully 100% cisgender, never even crossed their minds the other thing, they are probably lying to themselves. Whatever mechanisms they have, do not line up perfectly with the properties of man in the 21st century southern US. No, those dudes are going, okay, penis, properties of male, mechanisms in common. Okay, I adopt properties of male. Okay, then there's some women. You've got a 70% matchup between mechanisms in here and attributes of women. It's important to you to be a woman as it's defined. And so the 30% you just take on from the list, even if they don't necessarily match how you would have naturally behaved. I think that our ancestors had lots of issues with transgenderism, but it wasn't a fucking issue because yeah, I have a vagina, let's say, and I only but these lists, these categories didn't exist in the same way. The category was sort of a lot. Some of the actually, I don't even know. I wasn't there. The only category I know of was that woman bear a child. But then some women didn't want to bear children, so maybe they were, I don't know, maybe something bad happened, or maybe they just didn't bear children, right? So even that, the most sort of essential property of the label woman. So woman, vagina, children, okay? Even that, our ancestors could probably deny. And they could still be just them, the person, sure, yeah, I have a vagina, a woman. I have, my mechanisms, are better for certain kinds of interactions. Okay. A woman. Okay. But now we've got this super detailed, developed, specific list of attributes that don't really match anybody. So people who want to follow the gender role are just adopting what they are told by their society constitutes that sex, that gender. And then you've, of course, got other people who are like, what the fuck? So I have a penis. That means I respond like this to things. That means I like this. That means I do this. That means I want this. That means I'm good at this. That means I'm bad at this. And of course, the brain's going to go, holy shit, no, there's too much in there that's not true. And some things that are really important about myself are in the other list. So how are we going to resolve that cognitive dissonance where I have a penis, but my mechanisms, I think they match more this stupid long fucking list of female qualities? I'm a woman with a penis. Okay, so then the reasonable thing is remove the penis and make your body match the self. I don't think the self exists. I think that transgenderism, I think that, okay, so I think that gender is sort of I think that, how do I say this? How do I say that's a valid experience? I think it seems to me over the past few days only, and I want to know what if you're transgender or, if whoever, especially if you're closer to the material than I am, but try to consider what I'm saying about the mind. I want you to let me know what you think. It just wasn't a fucking issue before because I don't think there were these kinds of strict developed gender roles. There you go. I just keep saying the same thing, but like for me, sometimes I think I'd like to wear a dress, and I think about how great. I remember one time it was so hot that I all I wore was a skirt and a t-shirt, or I was driving without even a t-shirt. I put a t-shirt on, go into this store, and everybody's looking at me, and it's just so crazy that I'm supposed to wear something that separates my legs. It's our gender thing is fucking nuts. Everybody looks the bloody same. It's nuts. And so obviously I still feel pressure from the gender roles because I feel a little bit compelled away from doing something like wearing a dress or putting on lipstick. It's so attached to having a vagina for me. And I know that there's parts of me that sort of wants to. Don't know why. Maybe just, it's just the same reason why you do anything with fashion. I don't have to justify it. I don't love the idea of limiting myself to men's clothing. When I was a kid, I played with Barbies. Um, I would be at my friend Steven's house, and I'd play with his little sister's toys. And then if he wanted to play with action figures, he'd be ramming them against each other. I wanted a much more developed emotional interpersonal reaction, So I'd want to hold it, and they're having a little conversation. When I was a kid, I always felt like I got along better with girls, and I know when I was a kid that there were thoughts of like I identify more with women. And then puberty sort of hit, and you get this being a man thing shoved down your throat. And so it became the goal is that I need to make sure. I mean, I didn't practice or anything, but I would feel bad about not having a deep voice. Uh, if I'm crossing the street and a car is coming, I'm not speeding up because I ain't no bitch. And that one I'm still working on. It's hard for me to speed up because I associate getting out of the way of an oncoming vehicle with being a woman. I've got a lot of work to do. Um, and it would be really helpful if we stopped doing this whole gender thing, basically. I mean, and in Hungarian, they don't say he or she. They just have a third person pronoun. In French, they don't say his or her. The his or her is based on what the object is. So, let's say that this is a stylo, which is masculine. This is masculine. So, I mean, they should get rid of that too. But what I'm saying is, if I'm talking about a woman, I would say son stylo, son rather than sa, which would be for a feminine object. It doesn't matter what the subject is. So I know that we don't need so much gender in our language. English has less gender than French in most regards. Every noun in French has a gender and is used, you can use a gender pronoun. But in English, our possessive pronouns, his, her, show the gender of the person we're talking about rather than the object, as in French. And then in Hungarian, they have one word for it, person. Gender is a part of our every sort of sentence. In French, it's a part of literally every, maybe it's not the gender of the person, but it's a part of everything. And there are some cool grammatical features of that where, like, something could be ambiguous, but it isn't because you know that it's like, because you know that the adjective was feminine, so he's talking about the feminine thing. Every, form you have to fill out, male, female. When in a lot of those forms, whether or not you have more estrogen or whether or not you have more testosterone isn't particularly, it isn't relevant. Whether you have a penis or vagina, testosterone or estrogen, whether, you're better at this or that, it's literally a part of your identity. I mean, the first thing is, you have Mr. or Mrs., you've got male or female, then you get to the name and sorry, I really didn't want to get caught up in words, but old habits. Well, there's current habits. I got to work on that. And right now, I don't want to work on that. Right now, I want to share this thought. Of course, maybe a more efficient way to share it would be to prepare it, but that's not going to happen. If, regardless of whether you had a penis or a vagina, your expression and what you become was okay, there wouldn't be people killing themselves because that doesn't match their mechanisms, their different preferences, blah blah blah, or that doesn't match enough. And I think that I think that there have been people who have probably regretted it. Um, I don't like love the idea of repeating that because then people are like, yeah, oh my gosh, so nobody should ever do it. Well, I don't think anybody should do it. I think we should be changing these gender roles. I don't think people should be suffering so much that their reproductive organ doesn't match the list of attributes for that sex because there shouldn't be that list of attributes. It's okay if there are certain things that the average, I mean, bell curves, people don't even understand statistics. So they're like, men are better at this and women are better at this. But actually, it's only like the very best men at that are maybe better than the best women at that thing and the other way around, or the other way around in it for another thing. But doesn't mean that you take a random man that he is going to be better than a random woman. It's, maybe like 53% chance that or 50.06% chance that he will be better, because it's mostly overlap. Just type in Google bell curve gender differences, and someone explaining that, and you understand what I mean. So we've got this thing where it's just like these two circles. All men are better than all women at this. All women are better than all men at this. But that's the brain. We're simple. I don't identify as transgender because the definition of man is. I've always loved that idea. And I mean, not anymore, as I realize how problematic it is. But before, I had this understanding of man as honest, reliable. He's got integrity, and then women, no, I guess. And and the depictions of men on TV, for me, good examples of real men were Dr. House, Eric Northman in 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 True Blood. Uh, there's a certain look. Anyway, a lot of those things I don't really identify with, and I have in my journal like acting man. Hey, here I'm meeting those attributes. Now, if I hadn't been as compelled by that definition of man, if I had been more compelled by the things that I like about being a woman or about femininity, then I would have had much more of a, this is wrong kind of thing. And that sucks. That's stupid. Um, I don't think that our ancestors in the plains were freaking out. Okay, I shouldn't say freaking out. We're feeling the same dissonance between a single self, right? Because we have to figure out what the one person is that we are, and then this list of all these attributes. Because that's what it is. The dissonance isn't really between the sum of the mechanisms and the organ. The dissonance is really between the sum of the mechanisms or some of the mechanisms and this stupid list of attributes. If men were allowed to wear dresses, wear lipstick because it just looks nice or something, if they were allowed to, like, talk like this, and I don't know, I remember when I was like, and I should be trying to be more natural. I don't know what it will look like. It'll be forced at first as I try to find what feels right. I remember when I was 17, I was talking to someone from a town in Aurora, in Illinois, in the U.S., and I went to high school in Aurora. I went to a boarding high school, a residential high school, called the Illinois Math and Science Academy. And so I'm talking to this woman from that town, and I tell her, where I just finished high school, and she says, "Oh, you're smart," or she said, "Oh, that's for smart people, isn't blah blah." She goes, "Oh, you're smart. I thought you were gay." I know that naturally, I think I have more feminine mannerisms than you'll typically see me do. But that's so fucking stupid. Feminine mannerisms? What? 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 I mean, look, I'm maybe a little bit lighter, or I move around more. I don't even know what it is that's attributed to vaginas, and gay penises and butt penises, but you know, it's and it's so funny watching on Instagram all these right wing people freaking out about transgenderism, which is that they're like and so there are these really interesting Christian accounts of someone who almost transitioned or did transition and transitioned back or did transition and regretted it or whatever, and they're trying to help other people who are in this gender crisis, whatever, to come back to God and realize, to come back to God and stop being confused by this societal illness of transgenderism that's getting children to cut off their blah blah. But you know why children are cutting off their blah blah and want to change? It's because you've defined man and woman as this, and it's so funny because what's so funny is that these Christian former transgenders or near transgenders or whatever, they're always super ambiguous by those classical definitions. Like it's someone that if you saw walking down the street, you'd think was transgender, you'd think was a tomboy, or you'd think was whatever. And it's great because she didn't like reassume the properties that we assign to womanhood. So she's up there with like short hair, kind of moving a bit like a man, talking about how, I'm a woman and blah, blah. And it's so great, but it's also so weird how the people who love that content are the same people who would love her to go a step further and be more womanly, right? They probably think of her as not having sort of finished her journey. And maybe that's how she sees herself. I don't know. I mean, so because I know you've got I follow a bunch of right wing accounts, right cisgender accounts, and I see that they have liked what this former trans person is saying. Except the former trans person is not totally. I mean, there are some accounts where it's like she's like just totally feminine, and she's like, "Yeah, I almost became a man or whatever." But yeah, there's some that are like, "Hey guys, yeah, so I don't know. You got to just look it up." I think there's one Becky something, um, and it's like, what, what if we got rid of all these attributions to gender and stopped misunderstanding statistics about differences between sexes, differences? None of this, I think, would be happening. I don't think that our ancestors were hitting puberty and going, "That's a problem." Imagine that. So they go. So I'm like, "Yo, I've got a penis, but I'm a woman." And then her their mom goes, what do you mean you're a woman?" "Well, I love gathering, and I love the children, and I love talking to them." You mean like Steve over there?" I mean, it's not just because you have a penis that you absolutely have to be hunting. It's just that the penis people tend to go hunting. But I mean, there's Steve over there who's with us. What do you mean? Steve has a penis. What do you mean, woman, man? All right. So when we use the word woman, man, uh, penis, vagina, we use for just really to describe this, and yeah, we've noticed that there are some sort of tendencies that the penises tend to sort of get angry and like be more vocal, sort of about, or no, be more physical with their anger, whereas we tend to be more vocal with our anger. But like that isn't like that's not prescriptive, right? That's descriptive. I mean, yeah, once we start describing, that just naturally led to prescribing. Men are like this, women are like that. Oh, men have to be like this and women have to be like that? Yeah. Huh? You ready to go? I need you to wrap it up. Okay. Anyway, so I think that's just like really funny, that we buy into these gender roles and then have this change that thing, so that we better meet the criteria. Um, I don't mean to invalidate. I have no idea what it's like to look down and be like, that's not shouldn't be there. And I'm just wondering what that's coming from, whether that discord is actually between the non-existent self and the organ, or whether it's between the set of the organ and the list of personality attributes. And if so, yikes. Yeah. And also, the more that we have this transgender thing, of course, I grew up with tomboys who acted more like boys than the girl list, than the girl. They had more of the boy attributes than the girl attributes. They were they had a lot of mental boy attributes, and they had a vagina. Okay, but then you have to change the vagina if you're really compelled by, if that's like, whoa, that's a problem.